However, going to the crux of, one of the things that was very fascinating for me personally when I was doing this research, what's the genetic verdict on lactose metabolism in South Asia? Because we've had this millennium of ghee preceding us, and all these notions of, we had this abundance of dairy in South Asia, everybody was swimming in it and so on. If it was really, really true, then it should show up in our genetic makeup. And the one genetic mutation that, has been used as a gold standard so far, it's a basic flip between a C and a T. So if 13910C becomes 13910T, it means that lactase persistence has been achieved via positive selection. So recently there was a study. It comprised of 2,284 individuals from 106 populations living in the Indian subcontinent, and their salivas were taken. They took samples of their saliva, and they were trying to figure out if this positive selection and the presence of this genetic mutation 13910T was present. And as you can see on the slide on the right side, whatever's red, yellow, and green, there is lactase persistence in that area. And whatever's blue and dark blue, those people cannot at all metabolize dairy or any of its lactose derivatives. So what they found out was 4 out of 5 Indians in the sample were lactose intolerant. And lactose intolerance increases in South Asia as you go southward and eastward. And if you remember the maps I've shared with you before, they map and superimpose very neatly over the domestication of bovines map and also early settlements where they found some limited dairy processing. And one thing that it's important to note is this is not happy news for people of my tribe from Punjab. They cannot just assume that, oh, okay, we've got the carte blanche to now go ahead and have our dollops of dairy. Lactase persistence in parts of northwestern India do not imply 100% of the population carries this mutation. Just the same way that just because this mutation exists in the Scandinavian populations, it does not imply that a 100% of the Scandinavian populations are lactase persistent or lactose tolerant. So that's just a little caveat that I wanted to leave there. So all of this is fascinating because now we've connected archaeozoological evidence, isotopic analysis of fat residues in ceramics, and we've got the genetic verdict. And all of it goes to prove that early South Asians were traditionally, predominantly whole food plant-based.
That's incredible. Where did you do how did you do the research for this?
Public domain. It's open. It's open source. All you got to do is look up, Google Scholar. And also, I have to. This is a great question because one of the things that I looked out for when people were bragging about how culturally prevalent dairy is, and they were using science, but they were misinterpreting those scientific documents. So I looked for those headlines, dream headlines that everybody wants to see because people want good news about their bad habits. And when I started to look into those headlines, there were headlines like, so for instance, when I shared with you about the fat residue, one of the headlines was direct linkage of dairy processing in South Asia, the myth, finally revealed, yes, it's in our, ancestry. And I looked through that news report. The journalist had very, intentionally cherry-picked what they wanted to write and how they wanted to position that news report. But when you actually look into the science and go into the scientific, article and the data, some of which I had to purchase online, and it's easy to purchase. It's like $35, $25 for a piece. And when you actually start looking at that piece of research, you realize, no, that's not exactly what the scientists found. They found 5 out of 53 vessels had fat in them. And even then, even just a small fraction of that had dairy fat in it. The rest was probably indicative of meat consumption. So people cherry pick. And then, as Dr. T. Colin Campbell says in his plant-based nutrition course, which is a fantastic course, is that there is a lot of, I think he uses the term SCRAP. It's an acronym. And he says that look for things that are not scientific, but presented in a scientific way. Look for things that do not have proper authorship attributed to them. Look for things where math has been distorted to tell a certain story because people want to hear that story.
I wonder if other cultures would do this, if they'd find pretty much the same results you had.
Possibly. Yeah, absolutely.
When you think about it, just Asia in general, you don't see historically Chinese people of Chinese descent or Japanese descent drinking tons of milk or making recipes with milk.
Exactly. And I think that, in Chinese culture, China at this point in time is the #3 dairy producer in the world. And that is a shocking anomaly, because when you look at the Chinese cuisine, traditionally, there isn't any use of dairy in Chinese cuisine. Now, all of that probably is colonial heritage, and most of it, post the Opium Wars that happened in China, which is also linked to colonialism, and I guess the majority of it after the Second World War, and then rapid rise in the Chinese economy that you saw in the early 90s, which maps also with the increase in the GDP rates of growth in both India and China, but China grew far more rapidly as compared to India.
Yeah.
And we know that westernization, urbanization, adoption of a Western diet is correlated with rise in chronic illness.
It's interesting because I think most cultures and most people probably are lactose intolerant to some degree, yet it doesn't seem to stop them from ingesting what is really an unnatural substance for their physiology.
Yes, absolutely. And it didn't stop me, like I used to have lots and lots of dairy, and it just didn't stop me. I felt it was a complete nutrition. We will see as we get into modern India, as to how systemically and systematically it's generations of brainwash, right? And with good intent, because I'm pretty sure a lot of people who thought that they were setting up the dairy infrastructure in India were doing the right thing, but the basis and their assumption was that somebody told them this was the right thing to do, and that person, or not that person, but that mindset or that intention may not have been in favor of what Indians genetically have eaten for the past so many years, thousands of years.
The thing is, dairy is so addictive, as we know from the work of Dr. Neil Barnard in his book, The Cheese Trap and Body Imbalance, that once someone starts, it's very difficult to get them off of it.
Yes, exactly. Casomorphins, right? And the beta casomorphins are, Dr. Barnard has written about it. Dr. Esselstyn spoke about it too. It's very potent. And we're going to see how India became the chai republic, Chef AJ, because chai has dairy in it with the casomorphins. It has sugar in it, which we know is more addictive than cocaine. And it has tea, sugar, and yeah, so basically it's like and dairy in it, right? Chai has dairy in it, so it's just like and tea has caffeine in it, so it's just a really drug-like substance that the Indians got hooked to.